The door opened before I even finished knocking. I had my hand raised, knuckles barely grazing the wood a second time, when it swung back and a man stood there in a dark suit, eyes red at the edges, jaw tight. He was maybe 50, silver at his temples, the kind of man who looked like he had always been in control of every room he walked into. Behind him, the house was dim and warm and full of people moving slowly, speaking in low voices. I smiled. I held up the card. "Hi, I am so sorry to bother you. I am a rideshare driver, and I think one of my passengers left this behind. The address on the account matched here, so I just wanted to return it." He did not smile back. His eyes dropped to the card in my hand, and something shifted in his face. Not grief. Not relief. Something I could not name yet. Then I looked past his shoulder. On a side table near the staircase, there was a framed photograph. A woman, elegant, composed, with a slight smile that looked like it had been hard-earned. Around the frame, someone had arranged white candles. Some of them were still burning. The woman in the photograph was the same woman who had sat in the back seat of my car 3 days ago. I felt the floor tilt under me. "I am sorry," I said slowly. "I think I have the wrong house." The man looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "No, that is her. She died 3 days ago." I stood there with that card in my hand, and I did not say a single word. I could not. My name is Lorraine, and I have been driving for a rideshare platform for about 4 years now. It is not glamorous work, but it is honest, and I like being in control of my own schedule. I am a morning person, so I usually start around 5 and wrap up by early afternoon. I have had all kinds of passengers: college students, tired nurses coming off night shifts, businessmen who take calls the entire ride without once acknowledging that a human being is driving them. I have seen people cry. I have seen people laugh so hard they could not breathe. I once drove a man to his own surprise party, and the whole time he kept telling me about how much he hated surprises. I have also seen people forget things. More than you would think. Phones mostly. Earbuds. Jackets. One time, a plastic bag with 3 live goldfish in it. I never did find out what that was about. A set of false teeth once, in a Ziploc bag, tucked under the seat. I did not ask questions about that one either. I just left it with the lost and found. But this card was different. I found it wedged between the back seat and the door panel on a Tuesday morning, just as I was doing my usual wipe down between rides. It was black. Heavy. The kind of card that does not flex when you hold it. It just sits in your hand like a small, expensive secret. No name was printed on the front. Just a logo, embossed, and a series of numbers. The kind of card that says, without saying it, that the person who carries it does not need their name on their money. Their money already knows who they belong to. I remembered the passenger immediately. She had booked the ride around 7 in the morning, which was unusual for that neighborhood. The kind of tree-lined, gated-adjacent area where most people have drivers of their own. She came out of the house alone, dressed in a camel coat, moving quickly. She was polished the way women are polished when they have been polished their entire lives. Not like she had tried, but like it was simply the default. She got in, gave me a nod, and spent almost the entire ride looking out the window. She did not make a single call. She did not scroll through her phone. She just looked out the window like she was memorizing something. I dropped her off downtown near a building with a glass lobby. She thanked me in a voice that was soft but precise. And that was it. I did not think much of it. I moved on to the next ride, until I found the card. If you've made it this far, tell me where you're watching from. And if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. I pulled up her trip in my app. The account was registered to a woman named Theodora Vance. The home address matched the pickup location. I figured I would swing by after my morning block, return the card, and be on my way. Simple enough. I had done it before with phones, once with a laptop. People are always grateful, and honestly, it feels good to do the right thing. So I drove back to the house. The neighborhood was quieter than I expected for mid-morning. No kids outside, no dog walkers, no one coming in or out of driveways. There was a black car parked near the entrance that I was almost certain had not been there earlier that morning. A man in a dark uniform stood just outside the front gate, arms loose at his sides. He watched my car slow down. He watched me get out. He did not come over, but he did not look away either. I walked up to the front door and knocked. And that was when it all came apart. The man in the dark suit told me his name was Harlan Vance. He said he was Theodora's husband. He said she had passed away suddenly the morning after I dropped her off, a cardiac event. He called it the way people use clinical language to build distance from something. He was soft-spoken and composed, and every word he said was exactly the right word. He thanked me for returning the card. He reached for it. I should have handed it over right then. I should have said I was sorry for his loss, walked back to my car, and driven away. That is what a normal, sensible person does. You mind your business. You do not insert yourself into a grieving household. You do not stare at a man's hands while he reaches for a dead woman's credit card and think, something about this is wrong. But I did think it, because the house behind him was full of people, and not one of them looked the way people look when someone they love has just died. There was no one crying in a corner, no one holding each other. There was just this low, tense hum of activity, like a room full of people waiting for the results of something. A woman near the back staircase caught my eye and immediately looked away. A younger man in the kitchen doorway was on his phone, turned toward the wall, speaking too quietly for me to hear, but moving his free hand in sharp, cutting gestures. And Harlan Vance was still reaching for the card. "You can just give it to me," he said, his voice still soft, still smooth. "I will take care of it." I looked at him. I looked at his hand. "Of course," I said. "I am so sorry for your loss." I gave him the card. I drove 2 blocks away, pulled into a gas station, and sat there for a long time with the engine running. I could not explain it, even to myself. Nothing dramatic had happened. A man had answered the door. His wife had died. He had taken back her credit card. All of that was completely normal, completely reasonable. And yet I could not shake the feeling that I'd just handed something important to exactly the wrong person. I opened my app and looked at Theodora Vance's trip history again. The ride I had given her was still there. Timestamp, route, everything. I do not know what I was looking for. I just kept staring at it. And then I noticed something. There had been a transaction on her account after her death. Not a ride. A separate charge, the kind that appears when a card linked to an account gets used for a different service. It was small, unremarkable on its own, easily missed. But the timestamp was unmistakable. It had been processed the evening after she supposedly died. Her card, the same card I had just handed to Harlan Vance, had been used by someone who knew she was already gone. I put my car in drive. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself grief makes families act strangely, that stress does things to people, that I did not know these people, and had no business reading into a single transaction. I gave myself that entire speech, very calmly, very reasonably. Then I drove back to the house. This time I did not knock on the front door. I parked half a block down, walked to the side of the property near a low decorative fence, and pretended I had a phone call to take. I am not proud of it, but I am honest about it. Through the side window, I could see into what looked like a study. 2 men were in there, Harlan and the younger man I had noticed earlier, the one who had been on his phone in the kitchen. The younger one was taller, broader, and the resemblance between them was obvious enough that I figured it was a son, or maybe a younger brother. They were not arguing, exactly. They were the kind of calm that comes after the arguing is done, when 2 people are now just agreeing on what happens next. And I heard Harlan say, clearly, through the glass, "We need to move the rest before anyone notices." I pressed my back against the wall and just breathed. Move the rest. Before anyone notices. Now. Now, I was not imagining things. Here is the part of the story where, in a movie, the main character would immediately call the police, and everything would work out cleanly. But this is not a movie, and I am a 43-year-old rideshare driver who does not exactly have a direct line to a detective. I also had no idea what the rest referred to. I had a feeling. I had a transaction timestamp. I had a dead woman and a husband who had reached for her card a little too quickly. That is not evidence. That is a suspicion. I thought about Theodora Vance looking out my car window that morning, memorizing something. I thought about how she had not made a single call the whole ride. How quiet she had been. How, and I was only now letting myself acknowledge this, how tense she had been. Not nervous tense. Alert tense. The way a person is when they are watching their surroundings. I made a decision. There is an elder in my family, my Aunt Rosalind, who has one rule she lives by. If it does not concern you, face your front. Mind your own. Keep moving. And for most of my life, I have thought that was wisdom. In this world, you survive by knowing which fires are not yours to fight. But this one, my front refused to face front. If no one was going to ask questions about Theodora Vance, then I was going to ask them. The first thing I did was go back to my app and screenshot everything, the original trip, the timestamp, the transaction that should not have existed. Then I started doing what anyone does when they need information fast. I looked her up. Theodora Vance was not hard to find. She had been on the board of 2 nonprofit organizations. There were photographs of her at charity events, always on the arm of Harlan, always composed. She had a sister. I found a tagged photo from about a year back, a woman named Priscilla, who looked enough like her that you would know immediately. I found Priscilla's contact information through a community arts organization she was listed with. I messaged her. I said I was a driver who had given Theodora a ride recently and that I had come across some information I thought the family should know about. I said I was not trying to cause pain. I said I was sorry for her loss. She called me back within the hour. She had been crying. She said she was glad I reached out because something had been bothering her since the moment Harlan had called to tell her. She said Theodora had been in good health. She said her sister had sent her a voice message 2 days before she died, a message Priscilla had not fully listened to until after the funeral arrangements had already been set in motion. In the message, Theodora had said, "Priscilla, if anything ever happens to me, do not let Harlan be the one to handle everything. Do not trust him with the accounts. Promise me." I sat in my car for a long time after Priscilla played me that message. Over the phone, Theodora had known something was wrong. She had tried to put a warning in place. And she had done it quietly, indirectly, because she was the kind of woman who had spent years in a house with a man who controlled things, so she had learned to move the way water moves, finding every small channel available. But her warning had come too late. Or almost too late. I told Priscilla everything. The card. The transaction. What I had heard through the window. I told her I had documentation. I told her to get a lawyer. Her own lawyer. No one recommended by Harlan, and to not sign anything, not transfer anything, not agree to anything until that lawyer had reviewed every account Theodora had held. Then I went to the police. It took 2 visits and a formal statement to get anyone to take me seriously, but the transaction record helped. Financial fraud in connection with a suspicious death is not something that gets easily dismissed, especially when there is a paper trail. They opened an inquiry. They started pulling records. What they found over the following days was more than I had expected. Harlan Vance had begun shifting funds from Theodora's personal accounts within hours of her death, accounts that were solely in her name, accounts he had no legal right to access. The man I had seen in the study his brother had been helping. The plan had been to move everything before the estate went into probate, before anyone thought to look closely. The will reading was scheduled for the following Thursday at the family's estate attorney's office. I know because Priscilla told me. And I know what happened there because she called me after, voice shaking, and told me every detail. I was not in that room. I want to be clear about that. I had done my part before anyone sat down at that table. The authorities had already been briefed. The accounts had already been flagged. The inquiry was already in motion. When Harlan Vance sat down in that attorney's office, a calm and composed, and every inch the grieving widower, he had no idea that the transaction records had already been pulled. He had no idea that Priscilla's attorney had already filed an emergency motion to halt any transfers. He had no idea that the quiet woman sitting across from him, Priscilla, in a gray blazer, hands folded, expression controlled, already knew everything. He found out. Priscilla told me he turned a color she had never seen a person turn before. That his composure, that careful, polished control he had worn like a second skin, cracked in a matter of seconds. That he looked around the room for somewhere to put his anger and found nowhere to put it because every exit had already been closed. "I didn't come here to accuse you," Priscilla told him, borrowing words I had used with her. "I came to make sure you could not escape. The legal process from there was not fast and it was not clean, and I will not pretend it was. These things never are." But Harlan Vance and his brother were charged. The transferred funds were frozen. Theodora's estate went where she had intended it to go, to her sister, to the organizations she had quietly supported for years, to the people who had actually mattered to her. And I went back to driving. I still think about Theodora Vance on mornings when the city is quiet and the light is just coming up. I think about her sitting in my back seat, looking out the window at something I could not see. I think about what she must have been carrying that morning, the weight of knowing that the person who was supposed to be her home was the very thing she needed to escape. She never got to tell her story out loud. She hid it in a voice message. She tried to leave a thread for someone to pull. I only wanted to return a lost credit card. But what I really returned was the truth she never got to tell. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe.